All right, hello again, pre-calculus people. So we're getting ready to start the next, and will probably be kind of the last big topic this year. And it's going to be over what are called conic sections. And before we did that, I thought it would be a good idea to review something called completing the square from algebra. It's something you did in algebra 1, it's something you definitely did in algebra 2, but it's a skill that if you can get this down, will be very beneficial and kind of just have one step basically taken care of when we get into the conic section thing. So again, this is not a pre-calculus subject, but just a quick review of this thing called completing the square. So if you go back to quadratic land, we know the vertex form looked like y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And we also know the standard form of a quadratic was this ax squared plus bx plus c, right? Why was vertex form useful? Well, that hk literally told us what the vertex was. But usually we're given this standard form, so we have to be able to go back and forth between standard form and vertex form. Vertex form also allowed us an easy way to solve a quadratic if it wasn't initially factorable, just by doing some square roots and some manipulating from there. So before I get into exactly how this process works, let's do, again, all review of this algebra. If you remember from your algebra days, x plus 4 squared means x plus 4 times x plus 4, which would just be x squared plus 8x plus 16, right? And then the same thing, x minus 7 squared would be x squared minus 14x plus 49. Now, what do we notice about these things? The big thing I want you to notice is this b value. Once we have our standard form, notice my b value, and that what I have inside the parentheses here, it's half, right? So if I do 8 over 2, that's equal to that 4. Same thing here, if I do negative 14 over 2, that's equal to negative 7, which is right there. Okay, so it's always going to be the same thing. So let's take that pattern and kind of go one step further. Now, and I know this is just factoring. You guys looking at this, I know how to do this without even saying anything, but think of the pattern, right? So here, if my b is 10, that tells me that my pattern would be x plus 5, because 10 over 2 is positive 5. Same thing here, since my b is negative 16 over 2 is negative 8, so this would be factored out to x minus 8. Okay, now let's go one step further. What if I don't have a number here at all, right? But I want to make it look like this perfect square. Okay, well, we still do the same kind of thing, right? So we still take, okay, well, that's my b value. What is b over 2? In this case, it would be 3. So my plus 3 would have to go right here. Now, using that same pattern, if plus 3 is inside the parentheses, what gets put in here? Well, all of these numbers are just that b over 2 value squared. So this is going to be 9. Okay, same thing here. If that's my b, my negative 12 over 2 is negative 6, so that's going to go right here. If you square it, remember this is always going to be a positive because anything squared times itself will be a positive number. So that would be 36. So that's really what we're going to be doing when we do this complete the square thing. But let's look at it like a quote unquote normal problem on what that would be. So something like this. Let's say I wanted to solve something like this. And I'm going to pretend I don't know the quadratic formula and I don't have a calculator. Okay, so what we would do, here's where the real power of completing the square really comes into play. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the constant. I'm just going to subtract, I'm going to move it to the other side. And then I'm going to kind of see what happens from here. So I'm going to write this as x squared plus 8x. I'm going to leave a space, equals negative 13. And then I want to make that look like, and that's kind of what the next line here says, I want to make this look like x and something squared equals whatever. Okay, so I want to add in a number here in this space. I'm going to do that first, and then I'm going to add whatever number that is in that space, and then we'll talk about on this other side. So again, look at your b value. My b is 8, so 8 over 2 is 4, so my plus 4 would go right here. And then remember, every time we did all of these guys, once we have this number, we square it to see what goes in that space. So that's going to be 16. Now, on this other side, go back, don't forget your Algebra 1 teacher and what they said about a billion times. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I just added this random term in here. So I've got to add that same thing to the other side of the equal sign. So now my equation just becomes x plus 4 squared equals 3 when you clean that up. And now this is easy to solve to find the solutions. I could bring this back to the other side, and now I have vertex form and everything else like that. Okay, so my final equation here would just be x plus 4 squared equals 3. Now, when we get into conic sections, in the future videos, we're going to have usually one more step to do after this, but we'll kind of cross that bridge when we get to it. But this is going to be the main part of it. Okay, so let's go and do one more, and then I'll ask you to pause the video and do one on your own. And then we'll get into some with the leading coefficient. So same thing, right? So get rid of the constant, don't even worry about it, and then set up what the equation is going to look like. So this is going to be x squared minus 10x. I'm going to leave a space, equals negative 29, and have that same space. And then I want to look like x and something quantity squared equals whatever happens. And again, we want this space right here first. So it's always that b over 2 value. So in this case, negative 10 over 2 would be negative 5. It's going to go right here. And then if that's our negative 5, what goes here? We always square it. So that's 25. And whatever we do to one side, do to the other. Clean it up. Negative 29 plus 25 is negative 4. And there we have it. So go ahead and take a few seconds, pause the video, and see if you can do the exact same process with this one. And I'll run through the answer here in just a couple seconds. Okay, so first things first, we're going to subtract 93. Leave a space. And we want to look like x plus something squared equals something. Half of 20 is 10. 10 squared is 100 on both sides. Clean it up. And there we have it. Now, the only other thing I've got to talk about here is what happens if there's a leading coefficient. Okay, so we're going to start with the same thing. We're still going to subtract 41 and get that over here, but then we're going to look and see if we can get a GCF. Newsflash, you can. So look for a GCF, factor that out, and then that factor is just going to come along for the ride. Okay, so divide that by 24 by 3, get the negative 8. And now we do the exact same thing. We still want to make that inside equal to a perfect square. And then whatever happens, happens. So again, this is still my b value. The 3, don't worry about it. It's easy as outside hanging out. So negative 8 over 2 is negative 4. So that's still going to be x minus 4. Square it, 16. Here's the wrinkle, okay? I'm not just going to add 16 here. I'm actually adding 3 times 16, so which is 48. Okay, and then again, clean it up. So it's 7. Okay, so if you have a leading coefficient, still move the constant, factor it out with a GCF, but we're still adding in the spaces, just making sure that we're adding in the leading coefficient as well to the other side of the equal sign. So pause the video one more time, see if you can do this one on your own, and then we'll wrap it up for this one. So I'm going to add the 67. I'm going to take a GCF of -2 out, mind the sign. So that's going to be x squared plus 12x, leave a space. And I want to look like something squared equals whatever. So again, b over 2, in this case is 6. I'm going to add 36. But this time, notice it's -2 times 36, which is minus 72. And clean that up. So your final answer would be -2 times x plus 6 squared minus 5. And that is the process of completing the square. We're going to use that repeatedly when we get into conic sections in the coming videos, and to be able to find the different attributes and characteristics of those conic sections. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Come in tutoring. And until next time, stay safe.